to who I really am and what I'm doing in a collective movement that is actually women-led. And so I am a leader in the Reclaim the City movement, which is a movement fighting for affordable housing in the inner city of Cape Town, and also resisting displacement and evictions. And I'm also one of the coordinators living in Sissy Gold House. And so I went to myself to go and occupy Sissy Gold House in 2018 after I was brutally evicted from a home that I'd been living in for many, many years in Woodstock. And what I've come to know living there since 2018, but being a part of this movement since 2017, was that women, and this is a fact, that women living in these areas were the ones really facing displacement, because most of the households are women-led households. So most of the occupiers living in Sissy Gold House are women, and who came to live there with their families. And some women came to live there for various reasons. Most were evicted from the nearby neighborhoods, but others were actually came to live there because they were displaced due to economic gender-based violence or financial gender-based violence, and so they came to find a safe refuge in the occupation. And there's about 1,200 people living in the occupation, of which the majority are females and children. And the one thing that I've learned over the past 6 years is that people all have different backgrounds that are living in the occupation, but that the challenges that most of the women face are similar challenges. Women are normally the ones who have to go out and work for their families, or they have to fend for their families. And so the one thing that we then as an organization or as a movement then realize is that we actually need to coordinate this space so that we can collectively build this movement of women who were formerly displaced. And we did that by then sort of building internal structures. And when I say internal structures, I'm not speaking about buildings, I'm speaking about people-led structures, like leadership structures, like a monitor structure. And we then decided that we need to focus on certain issues or challenges, and that the very main challenge that we were then faced with was the issue of hunger, or really the economic issue that most women were facing at the time, was that they did not have money to support their families, or that many of them were not working, and that they then were the breadwinners. And we then, within the occupation, we then coordinated these structures, and the one structure would be the women's structure, or the women and youth, women and children structure. And that, as I've said, is a collective structure made up of occupiers inside the occupation, but then also with the support of neighbors and with the support of other movements and solidarity of other movements and organizations. We then started then to develop what we called feeding schemes. We then started with the community food garden. We started to connect also with women who were not living in the occupation space, to share and learn through cooking and doing langtafels and events. And we also then connected with one another and with other women in a solidarity network. And we then had meetings with women in different movements coming together in one space. So those are just some of the initiatives that we then, as the women who were leading in the occupation, seeing the need, the real need for women to be assisted and supported in the occupation that we took. But the one thing that is not really heard of out there, or that many of you will not come to hear of, is how do we actually tackle, or how do we solve or find resolutions for gender-based violence or for domestic violence that is occurring within the occupation. I mean, it would really be unjust for me to say that these things are not happening in the occupation, because we are a working class community, and like any other working class community, we too face all those challenges. And so we then had to decide, first of all, how would we tackle this issue before the issues really landed, and before we really came to know of some of the issues. We also then spoke about how would we tackle this issue, how would we deal with it as the people living there. And the one thing that we then did is we said that we will not deal with it totally on our own, that we want to connect with others who are doing the same work in other communities, or we want to connect with a broader community so that we can find a resolution together. And we then had a few cases, and I don't want to speak deeply about the cases, because I become quite emotional when I speak about it, because one of my family members was actually a victim to gender-based violence or sexual harassment inside the occupation. But what happened in that case and in many other cases is that we dealt with it in a way that we called in a third party to connect with us and to help us to find a resolution. And we also did not deal with it in a way that the person could not reform from what he was doing. And so the long and the short of it is that after a disciplinary hearing, so we have a disciplinary panel, especially for those severe cases or severe violations. We do have house rules, and we do have a disciplinary panel or disciplinary committee inside the occupation that deals with these cases, or with any general offences that are committed inside the occupation. And the one thing that for us is a serious offence, and that is gender-based violence. And so we have a constitution, a movement constitution, that says that if it is a serious offence like gender-based violence, like sexual harassment, like murder, rape, and so forth, then we have to evict the person, or we have to suspend the person from the occupation. we also have to suspend the person if they are part of the leadership. We need to then suspend them from the structure. And we then said that that's not what we want to do. That's not the objective of our movement. Because when we started off as a movement, and still today, we are fighting evictions and displacement. It would then mean that we would also be displacing someone. And we then got together and we, after the panel had then decided, the panel made up of people, of third parties, we then decided that we would seek the path of restorative justice. And in this particular case, and another, which I haven't mentioned, we then held the person to account. And the one thing that the person did then do is he actually started leading on the GBV campaign inside the occupation. He being a male. He also started a men's forum to support the women who were faced with this issue in their households inside the occupation. And he started with that immediately, and to this day, he's still doing what he's doing, but also supporting and encouraging other men to support the women who are facing these issues. And so that is how we have been dealing with those issues internally. And but just to flesh out there, right now, especially after COVID, because during COVID, one would have thought that living in an occupation, and an occupation where there's so many people living, that we would have that would be the main issue, that GBV would be the main issue. And it really wasn't. It really wasn't the main issue. The main issue was the issue of hunger, or people not having food, and income and so forth. And the other thing is that we haven't leaned on the state at all to assist us. But when it also came to us reaching out to the government organizations, they haven't really been useful, or they haven't connected with us or helped us in any way. And so the way in which we dealt with it, or we're dealing with it within the occupation, by having task teams, by having a disciplinary committee where everybody participates, and where the task team itself is made up of a collective of occupiers and leadership of the movement, and third parties, supporters, and other organizations, social movements. We then saw that as a resolution to restore justice within the occupation when it came to the issue of gender-based violence, or domestic violence, or even violence or the neglect of children inside the occupation. So I don't know if my 15 to 20 minutes is finished, but I'm ending there.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to hold questions if everyone's okay with that. You'll note down your questions, and we'll take questions and then have a conversation towards the end. Thank you so much, Corin. Maybe just to say, one of the striking things of the many things that you just said is this question around how violence is multiple. And gendered and sexual violence is really important, but economic violence is really affecting the majority of our population. And to try to divorce those issues is not helpful and difficult to do. I think we pretend if we think that we can divorce those issues. So thank you so much for mentioning that. But then also, often with social movements or occupations, people think that there's no structure, that there's no democracy, that there isn't work happening. But just from your brief reflection on how the occupation is set up, it's quite clear that there's a lot of democratic processing structure conversation that is actually going on that actually shows that social movements are not just random things, and they're not leaderless and unable to make kind of big interventions in thinking systemically about things. So thank you so much for that, Con. We hand over now to Lord Daniel. Okay. And I'm going to just open this. Give us 1 second so we can share your presentation.
Okay. It's good to be here. I think while we're pulling up the presentation, okay, that was quick first. I'll talk 2 seconds about equal education. We work in 5 provinces. 3 of those are rural and 2 urban. So we're based in Khayelitsha, just opposite the hospital. People ever want to come and visit us at a building called Isvivana. And the story I'm about to tell is layered. So I'm representing sort of reflections and experiences from our members, because we're a membership-based organizations. We've got, if you think about a union-style model, or the ANC, for lack of a better example. So we've got branches and schools that are constituted, that have leadership structures that run and inform our campaigns at a provincial level. This happens across those 5 provinces. Every 3 years, we have an electoral national congress where our leadership is elected representative of these structures. And in the organization, we've got members that inform their own campaigns, and we have support. We've got a post-school youth